Welcome to Stories in the Dark, a podcast about strange and creepy things. Come listen to the dark. Hello everyone, and welcome to our midweek surprise. To celebrate hitting number 1 in our category, and thank you for that, dear listeners, we will be having an extra special fairy tale this week. And you know what they say about fairy tales. Not all fairy tales have happy endings, and this one is no different. So be careful what you wish for. Your fairy tale might just have me in it. This fairy tale is called The Girl in the Forest, and it's a little bit more like a classic fairy tale. You know, the dark ones. He grew up knowing he was in a fairy tale. All the signs were there. He dreamed of a girl in the forest. He heard her voice when no one else did. He heard her singing while she brushed her long, long hair, singing about the boy who would rescue her. Everywhere he went, he had good luck. The villagers called him charmed. When he passed a cow, it gave the creamiest milk. Apple trees dropped their ripest fruit for him. When he wished for a new wagon for his mother, a tinker came and sold him his old wagon for a penny. When the village well went dry, and he walked down to the river for water, he tripped on a tree root, and a new well sprang up where he landed. If he scuffed his shoes or tore a lace, they were fixed when he woke the next morning, as if tiny hands had repaired them in the night. He knew he was in a fairy tale, and he couldn't wait till the day came for him to get his happy ending. When he turned 16, he listened for her song, as he did every day. But on this day, it changed. She brushed her long golden hair and sang of the boy who would find her, lost in the woods all these years, waiting for the boy who was destined for her. The boy who made his way across the river and over the hill and into the darkest part of the forest where she was trapped. With a tingle in his heart, he knew that the time had come for his happy ending. He would follow her directions and go into the forest, and he would be the one to find her, to rescue her, and then he would get his reward, and she would give herself to him, and they would live happily ever after. He closed his eyes and pictured it. He almost got lost in his daydream, but a knocking at the door woke him. Flushed from his daydream of the girl in the forest and how she would reward him for rescuing her, he opened his front door and found a travel sack just outside. When he looked through it, he found bread and cheese and dried meats for the journey, along with flasks of water and a sleeping roll tied under the whole thing. All thoughts of his mother or the village left his mind. He shouldered the pack and headed towards the river. On his way there, a tree dropped a fresh pear into his hands. He sat to eat and found a cache of nuts in a knot in the tree. The pear was the juiciest, freshest fruit he'd ever tasted. The nuts were chewy and sweet, crunching between his big white teeth. He moved on to the river, leaving behind a pear pit and the shells of the nuts, and even more convinced that he was on his way to his destiny. When he came to the river, he was thirsty, having drank his water flasks already, heedless in his excitement to reach the girl. The river offered him clean water, and he drank his fill, then let the water run into his empty flasks. A fish jumped nearby, and he grabbed it, then laughed at his good fortune. When he moved on the river, he left a smoking fire pit and the bones of the fish scattered on the ground. His full belly and good fortune warmed him on his walk. A half-day's journey from the river led him to the place where the trees thickened and the sky darkened. The air took on a heavy, dusty feel. He paused and looked around for a sign. The trees had no fruit for him, and there were no fish or nuts. His heart sank like a stone, and he wondered why his luck had left him when he had followed all her directions. He sank to his knees and closed his eyes, listening for her song, wanting only to rescue her and watch her brush her hair and see the gratitude and love in her liquid eyes. He heard a whisper of song winding through the trees, and his heart pounded with excitement. When he opened his eyes, there was a torch in the ground in front of him, and he knew his luck was still with him. The torch lit his way as he stepped into the darkest part of the forest. There were no animals here, no fruit, just dark berries against green-black leaves and sharp, sharp thorns that curved like claws. He pushed through them, slicing his hands, and he knew this must be the challenge that fairy tales demanded of their heroes. He used the torch to scare the brambles and clear a path, knowing that she must be trapped in the heart of the brambles and vines and thorns. The sun set and rose and set again while he pushed his way through the dark, dark forest. Even at its strongest, the sun only cast a weak light through the tops of the tall trees, but he still missed it when it was gone. When he started to tire, when he felt weak, he heard her song, growing stronger as the sun faded for the last time, drawing him deeper into the forest, the smell of earth and damp surrounding him. At last, at long last, he heard her voice close to him, out loud, not just in his head. She was crying, and he rushed through the last of the brambles and found her in a small clearing, sitting as he'd always pictured her, resting on a tree stump with her golden hair shining in the dark. She looked up at him, her eyes full of tears and hope. "Have you come to rescue me?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. He rushed to her side and took her hand, knowing that he'd reached the heart of his fairy tale, that his reward was almost his to take. "I'm here. You're safe now," he whispered back, stroking her yellow hair, wiping tears from her pale, pale skin. "I knew you'd come. I knew you'd find me," she said, her voice stronger now. "I waited and waited for a hero to come find me, and now you are finally here." She gazed up at him, her eyes full of feeling. "I'm here. I'm here," he said huskily, veins filling with fire at being so close to her at last. Her hands reached up and pulled him closer. She wove her fingers through his dark curls. "Are you ready for your reward?" He leaned in, more ready than she could guess, ready to take what he had earned. He kissed her hard, not thinking of how hungry she must be, trapped here in the heart of the forest. How tired she must be from singing the charms that brought him safely to her. He thought only of how he dreamed of this moment, of his happily ever after. She had dreams too, the girl in the forest. So he kissed her deeply as her fingers curled like claws into his scalp and her arms wrapped like vines, pulling him closer and binding him to her, and she sucked his tongue into her mouth, and 1,000 tiny teeth like thorns sank into him, bleeding him as the sun rose and set and rose again. And she hummed to herself, and she dreamed of men who took and took and took what was in front of them, and left only ashes and bones behind, just as they were only bones when she was done with them, the bones of 1,000 years in the ground beneath her feet. There was a rustle and chittering in the forest around her as she fed, the sounds of tiny hands that helped men find what they most desired, no matter the cost. They whispered to the girl in the forest, and they told her of a boy in the next village, a boy who took their gifts and gave nothing in return. And so she started weaving a new song just for him.